One storm track is about to sweep across the entire country, and it is carrying three separate kinds of trouble with it: severe storms, dangerous flooding, and heat that simply refuses to break. Today, powerful storm clusters push out of the Ozarks and roll into the Mid-South, and they can produce damaging winds, large hail, flash flooding, and even a couple of tornadoes. By tomorrow, more scattered storms fire up, and giant hail becomes the headline across the high plains. Outside of that storm track, the story flips completely. Oppressive heat and extreme humidity are baking the south. Eyes on that same heat is expanding into the desert southwest. Storms on one side, a furnace on the other. A dangerous clash between heat and severe weather is on the way, and the area involved is enormous. There's a lot to break down, so let's go straight to the maps and start with the severe weather threat over the next few days. We begin with today, which is Wednesday. There's a level 2 out of 5 slight risk of severe weather in place for the Ozarks and the mid-Mississippi Valley. That covers the area near Mayfield, Kentucky, and it also includes ground just east of Springfield, Missouri. If you live inside that zone, today is a day to keep your phone charged and your alerts turned on. Wrapped around that slight risk is a marginal threat, and it is much bigger than most people realize. It runs from New Mexico all the way north into South Dakota, and it reaches east into central Illinois. Inside that entire footprint, all hazards of severe weather are possible today. Wind, hail, and even an isolated tornado are all on the table somewhere. But let me be very clear about the main story. Damaging wind gusts are the primary concern today. That is especially true around and just south of St. Louis, where the strongest storms are most likely to organize into something that can knock down trees and power lines. And it is worth explaining what those risk levels actually mean, because the numbers get thrown around a lot. A marginal threat means storms are possible, but they should generally stay isolated and short-lived. A slight risk, which is level 2 out of 5, means scattered severe storms are expected, and a few of them may become strong enough to cause real damage. Neither category is a reason to panic. Both are a reason to pay attention. The difference between an ordinary summer storm and a damaging one often comes down to a few small ingredients lining up at exactly the right moment. And that is precisely the kind of setup we are dealing with today. Now here is where I want to push a little beyond the current outlook. I do think the slight risk may actually get expanded northward into central and northern Missouri, and possibly into western Illinois as well. The reason is simple. We may have an afternoon round of thunderstorms that produces damaging wind gusts, and that same round could also produce an isolated tornado near the St. Louis area. That is not a guarantee. It is a realistic scenario, and it is one worth preparing for. There is also a hail risk today, but I want to keep expectations grounded. Large hail should stay isolated. Nothing larger than the size of ping pong balls is very likely with today's storms. That is still enough to dent a car hood and crack a windshield, so if you have a garage or a covered spot, use it. But this is not a giant hail day across the mid-Mississippi Valley. I also want to spend a moment on flash flooding because it tends to get overlooked on days like this one, when clusters of storms move slowly, or when they train over the same ground one after another. Rainfall rates climb quickly and the water starts pooling in the low spots. That is the flooding threat tied to today's storms. It does not take a historic rainfall total to make a road impassable. It takes a clogged storm drain and one heavy cell that refuses to move along. So if you come across a flooded roadway tonight, turn around and find another way. Do not try to judge the depth from behind the wheel in the dark, because moving water hides exactly how deep it really is. The tornado risk for the time being includes Springfield, Missouri, Cape Girardeau, and Clarksville, Tennessee. Those are the areas currently highlighted for at least a low tornado threat. However, I do think that tornado risk may be expanded a little further north in our next outlook. That expansion could bring in St. Louis, Jefferson City, and western Illinois. So if you live in any of those cities, do not tune out just because you are outside the current line on the map. These lines move. After today, the focus shifts. Thursday and Friday's risks swing back into the Midwest and toward the East Coast. Right now, the Storm Prediction Center has a marginal threat drawn from central Nebraska back into Minneapolis and western Wisconsin. Then, on Friday, I think that risk shifts a little further east, picking up more of Wisconsin, more of Iowa, and even northern Illinois. The East Coast gets involved too. We are expecting isolated severe weather Thursday afternoon near Washington, D.C., Norfolk, and Philadelphia. Damaging winds are the main concern in all of those areas. Isolated large hail may be on the table near Minneapolis. And a very low tornado risk is possible over in the Midwest, though it should be a slightly higher risk on Friday. Now let's talk about timing, because that is what actually matters when you're trying to plan your day. Starting with what is happening right now. We already have a round of thunderstorms impacting Cape Girardeau, just east of Springfield. As that cluster of thunderstorms moves across the mid-Mississippi Valley this morning, it might produce isolated 60-mile-per-hour damaging wind gusts. That is enough to take down weak limbs and cause scattered power outages. If you are commuting through that corridor, expect heavy rain and reduced visibility. There's also another weak area of thunderstorms developing west of Omaha. That one is not impressive right now, but it could still produce some isolated wind as it matures. Keep an eye on it if you are in that part of the plains. Then, as we head into the afternoon hours, this is when severe weather may start to ramp back up again. And here's the interesting part. The ramp up will probably happen over Iowa and Missouri, where a cluster of thunderstorms may form during the afternoon. We are not exactly sure where that cluster is going to initiate. That single detail changes the entire evening. Here is why. The further east that line starts, the better the chance of Saint. Lewis actually sees some level of severe weather this evening, and that threat may even be significant. If it starts further west, the line has more time to weaken before it arrives. If it starts further east, it arrives with more punch. That is the fork in the road we are watching all afternoon. Right around 5 to 6 o'clock, widespread showers and thunderstorms will be stretching from the Kansas City area back toward Columbus, Ohio. That is a long corridor of active weather. Damaging winds are the main concern along that entire stretch, so if you are inside it, this is your window to be paying attention. A very low tornado risk might also be in play for any storms around, or just north and east of Kansas City, right around 5 to 8 o'clock this evening. That is a low risk, not a high one, but low is not zero. So just make sure you have ways to receive weather alerts, a phone with alerts enabled, a weather radio, or both. Do not rely on hearing a siren from inside your house. If you're somewhere along that Kansas City to Columbus corridor this evening, here's what to watch for. Skies that go from bright to dark in a matter of minutes, a sudden shift in the wind direction, a low, ragged shelf of cloud pushing out ahead of the rain. Those are the signs that the leading edge of a wind-driven line is arriving at your location. When you see that, get inside, move away from windows, and stay there until the line passes through. Most of these events are over in 15 or 20 minutes. The trouble usually comes from people who decide to stand outside and watch it arrive. After 7 to 8 o'clock, that line of thunderstorms will likely push toward the St. Louis area. As it does, it continues to carry the potential for damaging wind gusts and even an isolated tornado threat. If you live in or around St. Louis, that is your window. Bring in loose patio furniture before dark. Know where your safe room is, then go about your evening. Now, one thing I want to flag, honestly. The HRRR does not show much of any storm activity forming this afternoon or evening near Springfield or Cape Girardeau. That sounds like good news, and it might be. But keep in mind, there might be a storm or two, and if any do get going, damaging winds, hail, and a low tornado risk will all be possible. A quiet model run is not a promise. Then late tonight into early tomorrow morning, that line will likely continue moving toward Evansville, Louisville, and even Cincinnati. If you are in those cities, this is an overnight arrival, which is exactly why alerts matter. Overnight storms are the ones people sleep through. Eventually, that line should fall apart as it moves toward Knoxville and Pikeville early Thursday morning. I want to explain why I keep saying could happen and might happen. It is not hedging for the sake of hedging. It is because this is mesoscale severe weather. These are smaller, short-lived features that models struggle to pin down more than a few hours in advance. A great example of that was yesterday. We had storms over southern Wisconsin that were not even forecast to happen. We wound up having a few tornado warnings near Milwaukee. Nobody had that circled on a map the morning before. That is the nature of this pattern. So it is something that could happen today. It is definitely something we should be staying weather aware for. And honestly, do not be surprised if there are some curveballs thrown into our forecast later today. If there are any major changes, we will let you know on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can follow us on all of those platforms at Max Velocity WX. And if you are finding this forecast useful, take a second to subscribe and turn on notifications. It is a busy stretch of weather, and updates are going to come fast over the next few days. Now let's move to Thursday, where we are looking at two completely different areas. One will be in the Midwest, the other runs along the East Coast. The East Coast storms will mainly be a cluster that forms during the afternoon. This is coming from the remnant energy of the storms happening today across the Ohio Valley and the Mississippi Valley. In other words, today's system does not just die, it hands off. That leftover energy gets a second life along the coast tomorrow. Damaging winds will be the main concern there, with the window running from about 2 o'clock Eastern Time through about 8 o'clock. Storms should start to form near Baltimore, Philadelphia, and New York City. That line will likely push across New York City and almost all of New Jersey during the late afternoon and early evening. That puts it right around rush hour, which is the worst possible timing for one of the busiest travel corridors in the country. Most of the storms will likely move offshore sometime around 7 to 8 o'clock Eastern Time or so. But again, damaging winds anywhere from 60 to 70 miles per hour are possible. That is enough to bring down tree limbs onto cars, cause localized power outages, and make driving genuinely hazardous. If you are commuting home through the New York and New Jersey corridor tomorrow evening, build in extra time and be ready to pull over if a storm crosses your route. And a quick word for everyone in that corridor who is not driving. Damaging wind events cause the most trouble in dense areas simply because there is so much for the wind to hit. Scaffolding, signage, patio umbrellas, construction fencing, and older trees all become problems at the same moment. If you are walking or waiting for a train when that line arrives, get under a solid roof rather than a bus shelter or a thin awning. Give yourself a few extra minutes on the front end of the evening. Storms that arrive during rush hour do not only threaten your safety, they also wreck your schedule. If you live down in the southeast, a pretty typical day of severe weather is ahead for Thursday. If any severe weather does get going, quarter-size hail and 60-mile-per-hour winds are possible. Otherwise, it is mostly going to be a lot of lightning and some heavy rainfall. That is a normal summer afternoon in the southeast, but lightning is still a serious hazard. If you hear thunder, get indoors. Over in the Midwest, we are a little uncertain how Thursday is going to evolve. We will have an environment where an isolated tornado may be possible from Duluth all the way back toward Sioux City. That is a long stretch of ground, and I want to be careful not to overstate it. Generally speaking, I think most of our storms on Thursday are not going to be very organized. When storms are not organized, they tend to fight each other rather than build into one dominant line. That usually cuts down the tornado threat while leaving other hazards intact. Large hail is going to be the main concern out of any storms that do form. Isolated, damaging wind gusts are possible as well. The tornado threat should remain on the very low side of things. So for the Midwest on Thursday, protect your vehicles, watch the sky, and do not let your guard down just because the headline threat is hail. Then we get to Friday. This is the day I want you circling. We are anticipating a little bit more severe weather across the Midwest on Friday, where we could have a few supercells that form basically from Marquette, Michigan, all the way down toward Chicago. Supercells are the storms that rotate. They are the ones capable of producing the most extreme hazards, and when they show up in a forecast, the entire tone of the day changes. Damaging winds are still the main concern on Friday, but we could also see an isolated tornado threat near the Chicago area. That is not a high-end tornado outbreak forecast. It is a legitimate isolated risk in a heavily populated metro, and that combination is always worth taking seriously. The RRFS model is forecasting the possibility of one or two supercells that try to form near Janesville and Rockford. Those storms would then eventually move into Chicago right around, and just after rush hour on Friday. If that verifies, you are talking about rotating storms arriving in one of the largest metro areas in the country at the exact moment the roads are full. So there is definitely some level of concern there. Then, as we go into the late evening and overnight hours Friday, the RRFS has more storms forming over central Illinois and central Iowa. Those storms could easily produce a significant threat of damaging wind gusts if that were to transpire. Overnight wind events are the ones that catch people off guard, so we will be watching that closely as well. So if you live anywhere from Rockford and Janesville east into the Chicago metro, here is your plan for Friday. Check the forecast again Friday morning, then check it one more time before you leave work. If storms are already firing to your west by late afternoon, consider staying put for an extra half hour instead of driving straight into them. Rotating storms and packed expressways are a bad mix, and a vehicle is one of the worst places to be during a wind event. Make sure the people in your household know where to go if a warning is issued while you're still on the road, so nobody is standing around waiting for instructions. Now, I want to keep this honest. There is a lot of uncertainty even with our forecast a few days out. Things will change. But I will say that Friday does look like it has the best chance of having a tornado threat out of any of the next 3 to 4 days here in the United States. That makes it a day we need to keep an eye on, even though the details are still fuzzy. Stay tuned, and we will keep you posted with the latest. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel so those updates actually reach you. Once we get past the Friday confusion, we move into the weekend. On Saturday, that same storm system will move across the Great Lakes. It could lead to a couple more isolated, severe storms along the East Coast, but nothing really organized is forecast at this time. So Saturday looks manageable for most of you. Sunday and Monday, a low-pressure system will try to form in the Central Plains. I'm not expecting much in the way of severe weather from that one. It is there on the maps, but it does not look like a significant player. Things do get a little more interesting again Monday and Tuesday. A small storm system will be moving across the Midwest, and that could spawn at least a few supercells on Monday in Wisconsin. Then Tuesday could lead to some severe weather over in Michigan. There's a lot of uncertainty with the track of that storm at this time, so treat those days as a heads up rather than a firm forecast. And then by Wednesday and Thursday, we could have a very sizable storm impacting the East Coast, bringing heavy rainfall and even some severe weather. That is a longer range signal, but it is a meaningful one because of what comes behind it. That storm is going to lead to a big cool down and a lot of relief for those across the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, and even as far south as Tennessee, or Mississippi, and Alabama. Temperatures could drop substantially by the end of the month as that system makes its way through. Severe weather might also be a little suppressed around that time period. So if you have been waiting for a break, that is where the maps are pointing. Which brings us to the heat, and this is the part a lot of you have been asking about. Trust me when I say this. Everybody and their mother wants the heat wave to go away over in Texas and Oklahoma. I have been getting asked on every single video, when is Texas getting relief? And unfortunately, I cannot give you any good news, at least for the next 7 days or so, because the temperatures are going to be brutal. They're also going to get worse in Kansas by Friday and Saturday, as that heat dome builds across the southern plains. A heat dome is exactly what it sounds like. It traps hot air in place, sinks it, and reheats it day after day. That is why these patterns are so stubborn and so dangerous. The desert southwest is going to be brutally hot as well. Combine that with the extreme humidity across the south, and you have a stretch of the country where the air itself becomes a health hazard. If you work outdoors in those regions, this is not a normal week. Water, shade, and rest are not optional. Check on elderly neighbors. Never leave anyone in a parked car, not even for a minute. The humidity is what makes this stretch so punishing. When the air is that loaded with moisture, sweat stops evaporating efficiently, and your body loses its main way of cooling itself down. That is why the same temperature can feel manageable in a dry climate and genuinely dangerous in a humid one. Overnight matters too. When the low temperature stays elevated, homes without air conditioning never get a chance to reset. And the heat quietly stacks up day after day after day. So pace yourself, take real breaks in the shade or indoors, and watch for the early warning signs in yourself and in the people working around you. But look over here in the Northeast and also the Great Lakes region. If you want to go experience some nicer weather, just travel north and east. Honestly, go take a plane somewhere, because it is going to be hot down there in the southern plains for the foreseeable future. It is not going anywhere anytime soon. I do have some good news though. By Monday, we are going to see low temperatures fall into the 50s and 60s across much of the Great Lakes. That is genuinely comfortable air. Low temperatures near Dallas, Monday morning, are going to be only in the mid to upper 80s. That is really not too bad, right? For that part of the country right now, that counts as progress. Eventually by Tuesday and Wednesday, that heat is just going to continue. But cooler weather is expected to arrive by Wednesday and Thursday. That is the payoff at the end of this pattern, and it is worth waiting for. One thing that is pretty crazy is that the GFS model a week out from now is showing high temperatures in the 40s across Michigan. I am not entirely sure that is happening. I think that is a very, very, very bullish model run. But it is showing a large swath by Thursday morning of low temperatures falling into the 40s and 50s. I would not be surprised if we had some upper 30s for low temperatures in northern Wisconsin if this cool down does pan out. Atlanta could even be down into the 60s for low temperatures. So there is definitely a possibility for some real relief on the horizon if we actually see this happen. Otherwise, it is just going to remain hot down there in Texas and Oklahoma for the foreseeable future. So get ready. The heat is going nowhere in the Great Plains. But anywhere east of the Great Plains, relief is likely by the end of next week. Let's finish with the tropics, because there is something remarkable happening out there. Other than the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean is back to being quiet for the time being. That is a welcome break. I do think there is a chance, though, in about 7 to 10 days, that a tropical system may try to form in our main development region. For the time being, the odds are pretty low of that happening. So no reason to worry yet, but it is on the radar. Now, over in the Pacific, we have a Category 4 hurricane forming west of Hawaii. This is Hurricane Lala, and believe it or not, this is the same system that just a few days ago brought catastrophic flooding to the Big Island of Hawaii. It is now west of Hawaii, and it is one of the most powerful hurricanes we have seen in this area in literally forever. It is unbelievable how quickly this became a Category 3 hurricane, and it is about to become a Category 4 hurricane over the next 12 hours. Watching how Hurricane Lala has evolved over the last 6 to 12 hours is honestly stunning. Look at how quickly that eye has become defined. That is really incredible infrared imagery. A clean, defined eye like that is the signature of a storm that has locked into a serious strengthening phase. You can actually look at this inside of the free Weatherfront app if you want to follow along. It is available on iOS and Android. The satellite imagery here just west of Hawaii is incredible. And look how close it is. It is only a couple hundred miles off to the west, but this thing is a powerful hurricane. It might honestly be a Category 4 hurricane already. It could even be getting closer to a higher-end Category 4 hurricane. I'm not entirely sure, though, if they will have it any higher than maybe 130 to 135 miles per hour. Regardless of the final number, this is really impressive for this particular area of the Pacific Ocean. You can blame El Nino for this. The water temperatures in the Pacific are at historic levels right now, and warm water is fuel. That is how a system reorganizes and explodes in intensity like this one has. So let's bring it all together. Today, storms roll from the Ozarks into the Mid-South with damaging winds, hail up to ping-pong ball size, flash flooding, and an isolated tornado risk, with St. Louis in the crosshairs this evening. Thursday splits the country, with damaging winds along the East Coast during rush hour and large hail across the Midwest. Friday carries the highest tornado potential of the next several days from Marquette down through Chicago. And behind all of it, the heat holds firm across the southern plains and the desert southwest until relief finally arrives late next week. If you take one thing from today's forecast, let it be this. Have more than one way to get warnings, especially if storms reach your area after dark. Charge your devices this afternoon. Know your safe place before you need it. None of that takes long, and on days built on mesoscale details, that small bit of preparation is what separates a story from a scare. And as always, thank you all again so much for watching today's forecast. If you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe down below. We will likely have another video tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. In addition to that, there's a chance of a live stream today, and there's also a chance of a live stream maybe even on Friday. Stay weather aware, stay safe, and we will see you in the next update.